to my show, Searching for Integrity. My name really is John Smith, and I'm searching for people with integrity. Why? Because our country suffers from IDD, Integrity Deficit Disorder. Today, we have a lot of information to cover in different wards, different corners, but we'll get to it here pretty quick. Finally, the Congress in the United States has decided to elect someone and agree on electing someone, which they've been like a scruff over the last 2 weeks. And a lot of governing needs to be done, and it's not been done. Person is from Louisiana, and he's a Republican. And his name is Mike Johnson of Louisiana. He was elected Speaker of the House of Representatives today. Johnson was elected unanimously by the 220 Republicans who voted, despite being the fourth nominee tapped by the factious conference in 2 weeks. Johnson will wield the gavel as American faces a looming government shutdown. Israel wages war on Hamas, and Ukraine struggles to beat back Russia's invasion. Here goes his article talking about how he is and who he is. Republican Representative Mike Johnson of Louisiana was elected Speaker of the House of Representatives on today, ending a 3-week leadership crisis that has paralyzed Congress. Vice Chairman of the House Republican Conference, Johnson had maintained a low public profile until he was thrust into the spotlight this week in securing the party's nomination for Speaker. Johnson was elected unanimously by the 220 Republicans who voted, despite being the fourth nominee tapped by the GOP conference in 2 weeks, as the deeply divided party repeatedly failed to put forward a candidate who had enough support. Turn the page here. Every Democrat who voted Wednesday cast their ballot for minority leader on the Democrat side. Johnson managed to rally the GOP conference behind his bid after recalcitrant Republicans rejected the 3 previous nominees, House Majority Leader Steve Scalise of Louisiana, and Jim Jordan of Ohio, and Majority Whip Tom Emmer of Minnesota. Johnson's bid received a boost Wednesday from former President Trump, who encouraged Republicans to vote for the Louisianan. He also consolidated the backing of several moderate New York Republicans who had been reluctant to support some of the hard conservatives who sought the top job. Johnson, who is serving his 4th term in Congress, will wield the gavel as American faces a looming government shutdown. Israel wages war on Hamas, and Ukraine struggles to beat back Russia's invasion. The House needs to pass spending legislation by November 17th to keep the government running, and President Joe Biden has called on Congress to approve emergency security assistance for Israel, and Ukraine. Johnson voted against legislation in September that was kept the government running through November. And he has opposed assistance for Kyiv in the past. The Louisiana Republicans said earlier this month that the House needs to take all necessary action to help Israel destroy Hamas. Johnson is a social conservative who served on Trump's legal team during the former president's first impeachment. Previously did legal work for the Alliance Defense Freedom, an ultra-conservative advocacy group that litigates its restrict abortion access, and prohibit same-sex marriage. Johnson also participated in Republican efforts to overturn Biden's 2020 election victory. He filed a legal brief in support of a lawsuit that sought to block the certification of Biden's victories in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Michigan, and Wisconsin. Johnson then supported objections in Congress to the certification of Arizona's and Pennsylvania's 2020 presidential election results. And that's about that. Congratulations. I hope you turn out to be a good one. Well, I've watched this stock fruit futures, and here we go again. S&P futures ticked lower after Microsoft and Alphabet, which I think is Google, report live updates. It's tumbling to the lowest since June, and the NASDAQ heads worst day since last February. I was telling you this kind of stuff was going to be happening. It is beginning to happen. So let's look at it a little bit deeper. S&P 500 futures slipped on Tuesday night as investors digested quarterly results from tech giants Microsoft and Alphabet. Futures tied in S&P 500, NASDAQ 100 futures, Dow Jones inched up just 42 points. Shares of Microsoft jumped 3.7. The major averages of note notched gains in the main trading session. On the back is the corporate earnings reports. The Dow added more than 200 points to break a 4-day losing streak. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ composite gained 0.7% and 0.9%, respectively. We're getting some mixed to positive results in aggregate from the earnings season, so I don't think we get back to the Goldilocks period where we can dream that they're going to stop raising rates and eventually there will be accommodation. And in the interim, growth. Triverit Research founder, closing bell, I think, will end up the year higher on that, based on that. Interesting. We'll sign with that. And traders will be keeping an eye on several more key quarterly reports during the busiest time of the year. Boeing will be posting its quarterly results. During a relatively quiet week for economic data, Wall Street will look toward September's building permits and new home sales numbers for insight into the housing market. 60 S&P 500 stocks hit new 52-week lows. Around 1 of every 10 stocks in the 7 S&P 500 in trading at lows not seen in at least a year during Wednesday's session. Many of listing of stocks hit share prices last seen in 2020, but the lows of a handful go back all the way to early 2014. The moves come down a difficult day for the S&P 500 as a whole, with the broad index down about 1.4%. Alphabet, Meta platforms weigh on communication services sectors, and some of the others are doing the same. Stocks making the biggest moves midday, making big moves. They're moving down. Microsoft, Alphabet, Norfolk Southern, those are railroads. Wall Street's biggest bear by his call for junks and stocks to slump 10% by January. I believe this was pointed out from me. For this to point again, S&P 500 is stuck between rising support and falling resistance. Which way will it break next? Well, I say it's going to go down. Morgan Stanley, however, this optimism could be easily shaken, sparking another round of selling, which could feed on itself as portfolio managers scramble to lock in year-to-date gains. Our sense for speaking with investors that a majority still believe a fourth quarter rally is more likely than not. While what confidence level may have waned a bit this past week, many are still learning more along than they would like to reduce the probability of missing out in a year in which narrow mega cap strength has driven benchmarks. This is a very interesting part that it's coming after. Russell 2000 is down on the year, and the closer to the bear market lows last year when the bull market highs in 2021. Wow. So it's happening. It is happening. It continues to happen. It's been a banker who has thought that his information would certainly be warmed. Russell 2000 down on the year and closer to the bear market lows last year with the bull market highs. That's Wilson, Mike Wilson, I believe is his first name. And he is the president of Morgan Stanley. So this is a real task here. Whether or not it's going to take it over, I believe so. I do believe so. Okay, the top of this article, Biden's Israel stance angers Arab Muslim Americans, could risk 2024 votes. Here we go. Arab and Muslim Americans and their allies are criticizing President Joe Biden's response to the Israel-Hamas war, asking him to do more to prevent humanitarian crisis in Gaza or risk losing their support in the 2024 election. Many Arab Americans are upset Biden has not pushed for any humanitarian ceasefire, even as Palestinians are killed fleeing Israel's bombardment of the Gaza Strip. More than a dozen academics, activists, community members, and administration officials said. Their growing frustration could impact Democrat Biden re-election bid. which opinion polls show is likely to be a rematch with the Republican forerunner for President Donald Trump. In hotly contested Michigan, Arab Americans account for 5% of the vote. In other battleground states, Pennsylvania and Ohio, they're between 2%. President of the Arab American Institute. I do think it will cost him, this is costing Biden, and it'll happen all over again in the same play last time. Tuesday, U.S. officials joined the United Nations and Canada pushing for a pause in Israel's attacks on Gaza so food, water, and medicine could be delivered to Palestinian civilians. U.S. decried Biden's failure to condemn Israeli threats to cut off water, electricity, and food for over 2 million Palestinians in Gaza. Many are pressuring Biden to push Israel to temporarily halt its attacks on the Gaza Strip and have killed thousands of Palestinians. Biden's push for more than $14 billion in U.S. aid to Israel is also drawing fire. If you look at his rhetoric, it's unbelievable. And now they are trying to pump billions and billions of dollars militarily into with the Republican frontrunner, President Donald Trump. Israel, with some 100 million in humanitarian aid for the Palestinians, teaches peace and conflict studies at Swarthmore College. Even Biden's former boss, Barack Obama, usually a staunch backer of Biden's policies, offered some pointed public advice on Monday, calling the U.S. to continue the world, accelerating critical aid. Biden has appointed more Arab and Muslims to political posts than any predecessor, as well as the first two. Interesting. Very interesting. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan has principal deputy. We'll meet with a couple of those soon to see what's going to happen. Next item is Israel-Hamas war live updates. Israel and envoy calls for UN Secretary General's resignation. Gaza fuel running out. That's what they're saying. Running out of gas. Hospitals in Gaza have been warning that they would not continue unless they shut down because they don't receive more fuel. Other supplies such as water, medicine, and food continue to run low. United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. The situation is growing more dire by the hour. Palestinian people cannot justify the horrific attacks by Hamas. Those horrendous attacks cannot justify collective punishment of Palestinian people. He said on the X social media platform, previously known as Twitter. Meanwhile, Israel's representative to the UN has called for the resignation of Guterres from the UN History Secretary. the items I saw, that was with about Ted Cruz. He's very well thought about in the Senate of the United States Congress. And I'll start it off. Senator Ted Cruz, Republic, Texas, lambasted the Biden administration for its backward and wrong-headed stance amid the Israel-Hamas conflict, telling Newsmax that the president paid the checks for the bombs that terrorists dropped on Israel, but exhorts our ally not to respond. Furthermore, Cruz advised that the word ceasefire coming out of the mouths of Democrats is code, for Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself. Since Joe Biden came into office, he has flowed nearly $100 billion into Iran. Wow, that's a lot of money. Cruz told Alec Royally the balance. Joe Biden paid the checks for the rockets raining down in Israel, sending hundreds of millions of dollars directly to Gaza, even though they knew in their own assessment that it was highly likely that money would end up in the hands of Hamas and used for terrorism. They wrote the checks anyway. That is Biden proposing to do now. Send another 100 million to Gaza that will end up again in the hands of Hamas, again to be used for terrorism. It is utterly wrong-headed. At the same time, they're funding enemies of Israel. The Biden administration is doing everything it can to undermine the government of Israel. Cruz also criticized Biden's lecturing to Israel during his recent visit, saying, among other things, that Israel must follow international law. Well, no kidding, and they always do, Cruz said. There is no moral equivalency between the Israeli Defense Forces and Hamas terrorists. Hamas deliberately targets civilians. Cruz recounted how Biden's State Department, within hours of a massacre of civilians by Hamas on the 7th, was urging restraint, urging Israel not to respond. And you just can't fight a war, can't allow people to do that to you until that you come back at them. Every time you hear a radical leftist call for a ceasefire, what they're saying is Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself. I think that's disgraceful. Cruz told Bowling. Israel has a responsibility to defend itself, and we have obligation to stand up and speak the truth and make clear America stands with Israel. Well, no kidding, and they always do. There's no more equivalency between the Israel Defense Forces and Hamas terrorists. Quite a different entry. I thought I'd end with some here we go. Biden is now facing the unthinkable. It's provided by America Insider. The collapse of the Biden family has revealed the biggest fraud perpetrated on the American people. While parading around as a blue-collar guy for over 50 years in politics, Joe Biden has amassed a fortune for himself and his family. However, now Biden faces the unthinkable, as Democrats may try to replace him on the 2024 presidential ticket. 3 possible replacements for Democrats are Vice President Kamala Harris, Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg, or former First Lady Michelle Obama. Truth is that Joe was never a man of the people. Rather, he used and exploited the American people by putting the U.S. government on sale to foreign nationals. Millionaire Joe, in caps. Despite receiving a limited government salary, Americans have witnessed middle-class Joe transform himself into millionaire Joe. Joe has an estimated worth of roughly $9 million, while his son Hunter's is estimated to be far higher. How did this occur? Subpoenaed bank records that show the Biden family created over 20 shell companies, and they received roughly $20 million in payments from foreign sources. A total of the 9 Biden family members received an unexplained wire transfers from foreign businesses. Even 2 Biden's grandchildren received payments. It's unclear which grandchildren received payments, but most of them are in their early 20s when no personal or business ties to Ukraine, Russia, or China. This strategy by the Biden family has had an obvious attempt to diversify and hide payments. Banks regularly flag suspicious financial activity for authorities such as money laundering, tax evasion, terrorist funding, and fraud. These reports are called suspicious activity reports, SARS, and banks are required to file with the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. When it comes to the Biden family, there were over 170 SARs from multiple banks, according to Town Hall. These SARs are sent to the Treasury Department when banks have a strong suspicion that a crime has been committed, which is meant to protect the bank. There's no debate what this seemingly corrupt scam occurred. The only question is why. Welcome to Ukraine. The Beden family had no business being in Ukraine. No personal ties, no business relationships, and no expertise or experience in the energy sector. Yet Hunter Biden showed up from America. He sat on the board of Ukrainian companies, and along with him, a family friend. Beginning then, Joe wrote a personal letter to Archer, a friend of Hunter, and had also discussed and involved. What was he thanking you for? Tucker Carlson asked. It was kind of beginning our partnership, and he was thanking me and Hunter. Archer said, I think at the end of the day, for bringing this idea, I think we see excited the prospect for Hunter, and he was just thanking me. I think it was a nice gesture. Eyewitness testimony. Multiple eyewitnesses have testified before Congress that Joe and Hunter Biden put the U.S. government on sale by providing their influence within U.S. politics. Archer, the letter he received, testified at the House Oversight Committee and confirmed that Hunter put his father, then Vice President Joe Biden, on speakerphone, which meeting business partners every 20 minutes. Archer described how Joe Biden was put on the phone to sell the brand. Archer explained in his testimony. In one of those central business deals, Hunter and Archer were placed on the board of Ukrainian guests, and it was interesting. Archer decided that Hunter was required to get help then Vice President Joe Biden regarding the Ukrainian prosecutor. He was a threat, Archer said. End up seizing assets of Burisma and Nikolai, the house, some properties, and Nikolai. Ukraine and Shokin seized all of his assets. Numerous people have corroborated Archer's testimony, including Shokin. A lot of witnesses about whether or not it's true or not. Appears to be that way. Joe Biden's personal interview, and it just goes on and on and on and on. You know? And I'm certain that all of this is going to come out when it's time for it to come out. These are problems, probably with Chinese Communist Party, and it just doesn't look good. It doesn't smell good. None of this is not any good. Let's have him and Bobolinsky, who was Joe's denial that he's ever involved in his son's overseas. It's a blatant lie. There's a lot of lies going on. We'll have to see how it goes in the end of, well, I guess it's Congress that actually is going to have them to enter. Nevertheless, I think that we've had an interesting thing today. Listeners, tuning in to Searching for Integrity, and I appreciate you coming in, and I will say a famous adios. Happy trails again until we meet again.